General Electric sold its Fairfield, Connecticut corporate headquarters campus in 2016 for approximately $33.5 million to Sacred Heart University, a Catholic health and education institution whose campus now occupies the building complex where GE had governed one of the largest and most consequential industrial corporations in the history of American capitalism. The $33.5 million price for the headquarters of a company that had once been the most valuable corporation in the world is the most precise available measurement of what a corporate headquarters is actually worth when the corporation that built it around its own operational requirements has decided it no longer needs it. GE's decision to leave Fairfield for Boston in 2016 was framed publicly as a strategic repositioning. The company was moving its headquarters to attract the technology talent that the Boston innovation ecosystem offered and that the Fairfield, Connecticut suburban campus was not positioned to deliver. The move coincided with a broader GE strategic transformation under CEO Jeff Immelt that was attempting to convert GE from an industrial conglomerate to a technology company, a transformation whose ultimate failure is documented in GE's subsequent financial collapse, but whose real estate dimension is the specific subject of this episode. The forensic entry point is the gap between what the Fairfield campus represented to General Electric across the decades of its occupation and what the Fairfield campus was worth to any buyer other than a university looking for a suburban campus with existing infrastructure. The transformation of a corporate headquarters from a statement of institutional permanence into a real estate liability that the corporation's strategic evolution had made unnecessary, and whose sale price reflected the building's value to alternative users rather than any continuity of the institutional significance that had originally justified its construction and maintenance. The Fairfield campus had been GE's home since 1974. Jack Welch ran GE from Fairfield. The strategic decisions that made GE the most valuable company in the world in 2000 were made in Fairfield. The strategic decisions that began GE's subsequent collapse were also made in Fairfield. Subscribe now, because the campus that witnessed both the apex and the beginning of the decline sold for $33.5 million to a university. General Electric's Fairfield, Connecticut headquarters campus represented the specific category of suburban corporate headquarters, whose development across the post-war American corporate landscape reflected the mid-century corporation's assumptions about the permanence of its organizational model, the desirability of suburban locations for executive talent, and the operational efficiency of concentrating corporate decision-making in a campus environment whose physical isolation from urban distraction would enhance strategic focus. GE moved to Fairfield from New York City in 1974 as part of the broad exodus of major corporate headquarters from urban cores that characterized the 1970s, when crime rates, fiscal crises, and the quality of life concerns of executive talent were driving corporate headquarters relocation decisions toward the Connecticut and New Jersey suburbs that offered commuting access to the New York metropolitan area's talent base while providing the campus environments whose amenity package was considered essential for attracting and retaining senior corporate talent. The Fairfield campus's development reflected GE's specific organizational model, a decentralized conglomerate whose corporate headquarters housed not the operational management of GE's businesses, those were managed from the individual business units' locations, but the strategic oversight and capital allocation functions whose concentration in a single campus environment the conglomerate model required. Jack Welch's tenure at GE from 1981 to 2001 produced the specific version of the conglomerate management model that made GE the most valuable corporation in the world. The rigorous performance management system, the GE Capital Financial Services expansion, and the talent development programs that made GE's Fairfield campus the most celebrated corporate university environment in American business history. The campus's value to GE during the Welch era was not primarily the building. It was the organizational culture and management system that the building housed. The building was the physical expression of the organizational model. When the organizational model began to fail under Welch's successor, Jeff Immelt, the building's institutional significance declined proportionally. Not because the building had changed, but because the organizational model it expressed was being questioned and eventually abandoned. The GE Capital Financial Services subsidiary, whose expansion during the Welch era transformed GE from an industrial manufacturer into a company whose majority of earnings came from financial services, produced the specific strategic vulnerability that the 2008 financial crisis then exposed. a corporation with GE's industrial heritage, whose primary earnings generator had become a financial services company, whose risk profile was fundamentally different from the industrial company's risk profile that GE's regulatory relationships, investor expectations, and capital structure had been built around. The Fairfield campus was the headquarters of a company that had been built on industrial manufacturing, and that was, by the early 2000s, primarily a financial services company with an industrial manufacturing component. The mismatch between what GE's operational history had made it and what its earnings structure had made it is a separate case file, one that will appear in this channel's archive when GE Capital's financial engineering is forensically examined. For this episode, the relevant dimension of that mismatch is the real estate one, a corporate headquarters campus built for the operational requirements of a conglomerate management model that was being systematically dismantled at the same time the campus was being sold. The strategic rationale for the Boston move was genuine in one sense. Boston's innovation ecosystem and talent market were more aligned with the technology company that Immelt was attempting to build than the Fairfield suburban campus had been. But the move also reflected the specific challenge of a corporate headquarters whose physical configuration had been optimized for an organizational model that was no longer the organization's primary strategic direction. The Fairfield campus had been designed for management meetings, strategic reviews, and the specific interpersonal culture of a conglomerate management system. A technology company transformation requires a different physical environment. The open-plan collaborative spaces, the proximity to university research, and the urban amenity access that the Fairfield campus could not provide, and that Boston's Seaport District could. The $33.5 million sale price validated that the campus's value to any buyer other than GE was the suburban Connecticut real estate itself, rather than the institutional significance of the buildings above it. Sacred Heart University's acquisition of the Fairfield campus reflects the specific reuse dynamic that suburban corporate headquarters properties experience when the corporation that built them no longer needs them. A suburban campus with extensive meeting rooms, executive dining facilities, training infrastructure, and manicured grounds is well suited for educational use, whose program requirements overlap substantially with the configuration that a conglomerate management model's corporate campus had produced. The $33.5 million price represents approximately what Sacred Heart would have paid for undeveloped suburban Connecticut land of equivalent acreage, suggesting that the buildings on the land, however well-maintained and however historically significant to American corporate history, contributed negligible marginal value above the land itself to a buyer whose educational program requirements were served by the campus's general configuration rather than by any specific institutional characteristic of GE's occupancy. What the GE Fairfield campus sale reveals in the context of this channel's 103 case archive is the specific valuation reality of purpose-built corporate headquarters real estate. The headquarters is worth what it is worth to the corporation that built it for its own operational requirements, and what it is worth to everyone else is the land value plus the value of the general purpose building configuration, with the corporation's specific significance contributing nothing to the market transaction. GE's Fairfield headquarters was one of the most significant addresses in American corporate history from 1974 to 2016. It sold in 2016 for what a university would pay for a suburban Connecticut campus with good bones and adequate parking. The significance was real. It was not transferable. The campus was built on GE's institutional identity. When the institutional identity no longer needed the campus was worth what it was worth to Sacred Heart, $33.5 million and enough classroom space to justify the price. This content was developed using artificial intelligence tools as part of the research, writing, and production process. All AI-generated material was subject to human review, editorial intervention, and approval before publication.